Republicans in state houses have rushed to pass all sorts of restrictions, everything from voter suppression to anti-protest laws to banning critical race theory and now abortion. And that fight in Texas is just getting underway. Dr. Alan Bard of San Antonio became the first doctor to publicly disclose that he defied Texas's restrictive abortion law after he penned this op-ed in the Washington Post called "Why I Violated Texas's Extreme Abortion Ban." Now he's being sued by two former attorneys, one of which has been disbarred and the other suspended, but both of whom want to test the law's constitutionality. According to the Associated Press, Felipe Gomez of Chicago asked a court in San Antonio in his lawsuit to declare the new law unconstitutional. He said his lawsuit is a way to hold the Republicans who run the state accountable, adding that their lax response to public health during the COVID-19 pandemic conflicts with their crackdown on abortion rights. Oscar Steele, who describes himself in court paperwork as a disgraced former lawyer who lost his law license after being convicted of tax fraud in 2010, said he is not opposed to abortion but sued to force a court review of Texas's anti-abortion law, which he called an end run. Legal experts say if one of these lawsuits reaches the Texas Supreme Court, that court could then decide whether the legislature overreached their power. All this as Governor Abbott quietly signed even more abortion restrictions into law on Friday. A new law now bars access to abortion-inducing drugs 7 weeks into a pregnancy, and anyone who intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly breaches the law can be held criminally liable. That law takes effect in December. Joining me now to discuss is Democratic strategist and former political director of Priorities USA, Kristal Knight, and Texas State Representative Jasmine Crockett. So, Kristal, I want to start with you on this. What do you think the chances are that these challenges to the law will make it to this, not only to the Texas Supreme Court, but possibly even to the Supreme Court of the United States?
Well, I think it's very likely. What we've seen over the last week is that, people, advocacy groups are speaking out about this law because it's unconstitutional. No one should have the right to govern a woman's body, but the woman herself, she should have the right to choose whether or not she decides, to move forward with an abortion or to move forward with, inducing life. And one of the things that we've seen is that Planned Parenthood in the state of Texas has not had to be subjected to this law as it stands, and they've been able to administer abortions as they see fit based upon the woman's right to choose. And so I think what we'll see over the next few weeks is that many, the October 2nd, National Women's Rights, Women's March rallies will be happening all across the 50 states of the United States, but we'll continue to see legal challenges challenging this unconstitutional law. That coupled with the vigilante law or the vigilante provision in the law that would allow a person to, tell on someone or snitch, if you will, around a woman who is choosing to make this decision.
So Representative Crockett, if this case made it all the way to the Texas Supreme Court, is there a way for them to sever part of it? Could they rule some parts of it unconstitutional and leave some parts of the law intact, or would they be required to say that the entire thing, is poison fruit of the poison tree and throw the entire thing out? And if they did, then what happens? Do you just go back to the laws as they existed before this law was passed?
Yeah, first of all, it's good to see you this evening. And you're exactly right with your question. Courts historically don't necessarily have to uphold the entirety of any legislation or any laws that are imposed in any state. And so the court could absolutely determine that certain portions of the law are okay and other portions the entire law out. The likelihood of that is a little suspect, considering the makeup of our Supreme Court here in the state of Texas. And if for some reason they were to do what precedents would dictate they should do and follow the U.S. Supreme Court, then this law would be overturned and we would be done with it, and we would go back to the way that things were prior to this ridiculous law being imposed.
Uh, so, Kristal, if the Supreme Court decided that it was constitutional, how worried are you about this really being a test of Roe on a federal level? I mean, the moment that this clears, if it were to clear the Texas Supreme Court and you know, God forbid the United States Supreme Court, that's it, right? That, you know, every state with a Republican governor and Republican legislature would rush to copy the law as it stands in Texas, and you would basically be done with Roe v. Wade in all kind of practicality. How worried are you about that being a reality here?
Well, as a woman, I'm deeply worried. I'm deeply concerned. It's something that I would like not to think about. It's 2021, and we're still here talking about a woman's body, talking about a woman's uterus, talking about a woman's right to choose. And quite frankly, many of the people who are creating these laws are men who have no absolute, experience with understanding the woman's anatomy and what it means to, think about a pregnancy and terminating a pregnancy or going forth with a pregnancy. And so if this were to become law, if the Supreme Court unfortunately were to decide that this is, the law of the land, that they would let it, stand as it is in Texas, we absolutely would see copycat legislation in many of the southern states. But not only in the southern states, we would see this in other states that tend to have a conservative lean in their state legislatures. And that's what's dangerous about this law, is that when we see it happen in one state, we see other state legislatures attempt to create other legislation that would be quite similar. They might, shave off something that might be considered quite extreme in their states. But that's what we don't want in this state. America was founded on the right to choose. America talks about free speech. America talks about, you can do and be anything that you want in this country, but then we have laws that are created. We have men who are legislating over women's bodies, and that is not a constitutional thing that we should begin to, be okay with and normalize in this country.
Kristal Knight and Jasmine Crockett, thank you both for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.